Once upon a time, in an African village, there lived a young woman named Fara. She was a cheerful and kind-hearted, chubby with rosy cheeks and laughing eyes, beloved by everyone in the village. Her kindness and generosity were well known. Farah was always ready to share what she had, whether it was fresh eggs, milk, or her delicious homemade pies. Farah had her own knitted farm, where she cared for her chickens and a goat named Betty. Every morning, as the first rays of sunlight began to warm the earth, Farah would hop out of bed with a wide smile on her face. "Betty, are you ready to do some good for the people?" she would ask, approaching the goat, who waited for her while munching on grass. The goat would lift her head and take a step toward her beloved owner, her udder full of fresh, rich milk. In the chicken coop, Farah gathered eggs in a basket, humming cheerfully as she worked. "Good morning, Farah," greeted her neighbor Mara. "How are your pies today?" "They'll be better than ever," Farah replied proudly. "I added a little cinnamon to the dough. You'll be licking your fingers." "I'd love to try one," Mara said with a smile. "Your pies are pure temptation." Farah laughed and shook her head. "I'll be sure to bring you a piece. But first, I'm off to the market." She hugged the goat and, filled with joy, headed to the garden to gather vegetables and greens. Farah was generous and kind-hearted. She happily treated the local children to her pies and often baked them by request. Her laughter filled the streets, and her kind words warmed hearts. All the villagers knew that if they ever needed cheering up, they could always stop by Farah's, where she would be sure to brighten their day with fresh treats. Meanwhile, there lived in the village a handsome but self-absorbed man named Odem, who cared most of all about himself and his appearance. He could spend hours pondering his own perfection. You could find him by any mirror or even near water, gazing at his reflection with an expression of pure admiration. "Ah, how beautiful I am," he would often murmur, leaning over his reflection. His movements were smooth and precise, as if he weren't a mere man, but a work of art created to be admired. However, Odem's beauty went hand in hand with contempt. The moment he met someone who didn't meet his ideal standards, he would immediately write them off in his mind. Farah, with her full figure, was to him a lesser being, someone unworthy of his attention, fit only as a target for his mockery. Every time he happened to see her, Odem felt a mix of disdain and a strange irritation. "Ah, how disgusting! How can anyone be that fat?" he would think, curling his lips in disgust whenever he saw Farah. But one day, at a village festival, as he watched Farah dance, a sudden idea struck him. It was so unexpected and, at first glance, absurd that it left him momentarily speechless. "What if I marry this chubby girl?" he thought, barely suppressing a smirk. Of course, he had no intention of marrying her for love. Quite the opposite. Next to such a handsome man as himself, Farah would surely feel insignificant and clumsy. He even imagined that he could control her life, humiliating her for her appearance and making her feel inadequate. The next day, Odem set off for Farah's house. He knew her day began early. In the morning, she milked the goat and gathered eggs to take to the market. Approaching her home, he saw Fara in her work clothes, her sly smile gleaming as she wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him in surprise. "Odem, what brings you to me? Looking for eggs, milk, or perhaps some pies?" she asked, gazing at him cheerfully. Odem adjusted his hair and, not hiding his self-confidence, declared, "Farah, I've come for something big, your hand in your heart. Marry me." For a moment, she thought she had misheard him, but his expression was dead serious. He had truly proposed. However, Farah was not as naive as she might have seemed at first glance. She understood that Odem saw her merely as a convenient way to elevate himself at her expense. But she decided to play along with his game. "Odem, I know why you want to marry me," she said with a mysterious smile, "but I agree. I will be your wife." Odem had no doubt that her agreement was prompted by being dazzled by his beauty. After all, how could a simple plump girl resist such a handsome man as he? In his mind, he was already celebrating his victory, convinced that he had gained complete control over her. But he had no idea what he would actually face. The wedding was a modest affair, just as Farah wished. The whole village whispered and speculated about this unexpected union. Some even suggested that Farah might be pregnant, which is why Odem had rushed into proposing. But the real game was just beginning. Farah entered the marriage with a clear understanding of her place, while Odem, unbeknownst to him, had fallen into a trap set by fate itself. After the wedding, Farah and Odem settled into their new roles as husband and wife, slowly adapting to their daily routines. Every morning, Farah woke up early to tend to her farm, collecting eggs from the chickens, milking the goat, and starting to bake her delicious pies. Her energy seemed boundless. Everything on the farm was always in order, and her laughter echoed throughout the yard. On the other hand, Odem didn't show much enthusiasm to help, secretly expecting that marrying Farah would add to his charm. After all, standing next to a woman like her, he believed, could only make him look better. This continued for several months. Odem spent hours at the gym, meticulously grooming his hair, applying facial masks, and casting disdainful glances at anyone who, in his view, couldn't boast an ideal appearance. One day, while gazing at his reflection in the mirror, he noticed that his once perfect torso had broadened, and his face had taken on a rounder shape. "What's happening? It can't be." Odem exclaimed, touching his stomach, which now appeared round. "It must be something wrong with the lighting." He looked at his reflection over and over again, but the result remained the same. The problem was worsening. Despite his strict workout regimen and diet, the weight continued to increase. Panic gripped him more and more with each passing day. Meanwhile, Farah, on the contrary, was looking increasingly slender. She led an active lifestyle and transformed more and more each day. The villagers noticed her changes and couldn't help but admire her. Who would have thought that Farah would become such a slim figure? "Look at Farah," the women whispered at the market. "She has lost so much weight. Did she go on a diet? And Odem seems to be doing nothing but getting fatter. Looks like Farah has been feeding her husband pies," one of the women said, laughing. Odem overheard these whisperings, and they got on his nerves. One day he went up to Fara, who was busy in the kitchen, and said irritably, "Farah, maybe you should stop baking pies. They're making me fat." She set aside the dough and looked at him with a barely contained smile. "Odem, you've been refusing to eat them for several weeks now, haven't you?" He hesitated, realizing that despite his efforts, the pies had nothing to do with it. But his heart refused to accept this, and he began to look for other reasons. In desperation, he even asked the village elder for advice, convinced that he would help him regain his former shape. The elder looked at Odem and said, "Your appearance is not the most important thing in life, Odem. Look at your wife. She is happy because she is doing what she loves. Your obsession with your beauty prevents you from seeing what truly makes a person happy." The elder's words puzzled Odem, and on his way home, he kept thinking about what had been said. At the gate of their house, he saw Fara waving to a customer with a friendly smile. "Hey, Odem," she called out, noticing his gloomy expression. "Come here and help me with the cart, would you?" He felt a resistance. After all, he had never taken on work he deemed undignified for such a handsome man as himself. But something in her warm gaze made him move. Approaching the cart, he helped her roll it back. "It's not so difficult, is it?" Farah joked, winking at him. His pride stung, but to his surprise, he felt an unusual relief from the work. For the first time, he noticed how much effort Farah put in every day to keep everything running smoothly. His own weight issues suddenly seemed trivial compared to all she did for their lives. From that day on, he decided to try to change himself and help his wife more with the daily chores. With each passing day, their lives grew more vibrant and engaging. Inspired by Farah's example, Odem realized it was time to shift his priorities. He began spending less time in front of the mirror and more time with Farah and her farm. One morning, as Farah was preparing breakfast, Odem walked into the kitchen with a determined look on his face. "Farah, I want to learn how to milk a goat." Farah, surprised, raised her eyebrows and laughed. "You? Milk a goat? Now that will be a sight," she teased. "But sure, I'll be happy to show you how it's done." They stepped into the pen, and Farah explained how to approach the goat and care for it properly. Odem listened intently but felt a bit nervous. "Just stay calm," Farah encouraged him. "Goats can sense when you're tense." "Okay, I'll try," Odem replied, making an effort to steady himself. As he approached Betty, the goat looked at him curiously. "Well, Betty, I'm ready," Odem declared, and to his surprise, he managed to milk the goat without much effort. "You're doing great," Farah exclaimed with admiration. "See, you're handling it well." Odem was ecstatic, and a wave of confidence washed over him. He continued to learn, helping Farah on the farm. With each passing day, he discovered joys he had never even imagined before. After some time, Odem noticed that his body was changing. He began to lose the extra weight, and his energy levels were rising. One day, returning home after a long day of work, he excitedly told Farah, "I looked in the mirror, and guess what? I'm getting slimmer." "That's great," she smiled. But now you understand that it's not just about how you look, but how you feel, right? Odem nodded, feeling a sense of pride in himself. Meanwhile, the villagers began to notice how Farah and Odem were growing closer to each other. Their bond strengthened, and soon they became not only spouses but also best friends. You have no idea how wonderful it is to have such a husband, Farah told her friends at the market. He learned how to milk the goat, and now he even bakes pies. That's just amazing, Mara exclaimed. It's incredible how much he's changed. But not everyone was happy for the couple. One day at the market, Odem ran into Daniel, who was still mocking his appearance. "So, our handsome guy, still searching for a mirror?" he sneered, casting a mocking glance at him. Odem, not wanting to rise to the provocation, simply smirked in response. "You know, Daniel, I now value people and actions much more than appearance. That's what really matters." "How is that possible?" Daniel was surprised. "You're not joking?" "No, I'm not joking," Odem replied, feeling confidence swell within him. "I've come to realize that true beauty lies elsewhere." Returning home, Odem found Fara working in the garden. He hugged her and said, "You know, Farah, you've changed my life. I never thought I could learn something new and become better. I always believed I was already perfect." Farah smiled and replied, "You did it yourself, Odem. I was just here to support you." They laughed together and continued to work on the farm, cherishing every moment. Months passed, and the changes in Odem's life were evident to everyone. He no longer spent hours in front of the mirror admiring himself. Instead, his days were filled with work and taking care of the farm. He began to realize how much warmth and joy a simple life could bring when shared with someone he truly respected and loved. At the village feast, where they had come together with Farah, all eyes were on them. The villagers could hardly recognize the slim, radiant Farah as the former Farah, and the trim, calm Odem as the former narcissist who lived only for his looks. They looked so happy together that passers-by stopped to look at the harmonious couple once more. Sitting by the campfire, Odem felt for the first time in a long while that he had found something more within himself than just beauty. Farah, laughing, handed him a piece of pie, and he gladly accepted it, no longer recalling his previous fear of gaining weight. "I don't know how you did it, Farah," he said, looking at his wife with tenderness. "But it seems you've given me not only a new life, but also myself." Farah winked at him, nudging him lightly in the side. "I was just showing you the world you've overlooked for so long, while you were only preoccupied with yourself." Odem smiled and put his arm around her shoulders and said quietly, "You've made me a better person, Farah. I see now that true beauty is not the reflection in the mirror, but the light we give to others." They both sat by the fire, surrounded by the starry sky and warm light, realizing that something wonderful awaited them ahead. Because now they possessed something that couldn't be measured by appearance: genuine love and true friendship. May your life be full of joy and limitless possibilities. Thanks for watching. Be sure to share your opinion and don't forget to write a comment. Subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.